Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Late Night with Borg and myself, Brendan. Borg is running a little late. He does have a day night job that he's busy with over at Dakota News Now, so he's in the middle of that. But thank you for joining us on the Jackrabbit Illustrated Facebook and Twitter pages, as well as the FCS Fans Nation YouTube, where I imagine most of you have been hanging out. I can see the conversations going on here in the chat anyways on the FCS Fans Nation YouTube. First off, I want to shout out our title sponsor, Kubota Dealers of South Dakota. They have 10 locations across this great state of South Dakota. They have really, really high quality equipment. They've got anything you might need for your acreage or house, snow clearing, taking care of the lawn, or even some heavy dirt work. Kubota has got you covered. They have parts, service, as well as sales, of course, at all locations, as well as our title sponsor, Cubby's Sports Bar and Grill of Brookings, South Dakota. Cubby's is the best place to go for any sort of Jackrabbits action that you may want. Also, they've got fantastic beer, burger, chislic, nachos, anything along those lines. That's where you want to go. Head on down to Cubby Sports Bar and Grill. They just put up a huge JI flag there, which is sick. So thank you so much, Cubby Sports Bar and Grill, for being our show sponsor for the night. Really appreciate it. And can't really say any more than that. And then, of course, Jackrabbit Central. They've got you covered for all of your Jackrabbit gear and more. If you want to get in there, they've got a great options in the actual bookstore. They've got the downtown location, and then 2 hours before game time, and then during the game they have a location inside the stadium. Tons of really, really cool stuff there. I am checking out a golf bag that they got there that work might reimburse me for. So head to Jackrabbit Central for all your Jackrabbit swag that you might want. But yeah, not a great showing. Let me know if I don't sound great. I am upstairs. My oldest, has a friend over. They're sleeping in the basement where I normally podcast. So that's kind of what we're rocking right now. But we're just rocking through. Not a good performance. It just wasn't. Hats off to Augie. You could tell that they were out to prove a point. It really shouldn't. I'm kind of surprised if anyone was shocked by this or anything. That they played us tough. You've got a whole roster of players that feel like they've gotten passed over by SDSU and they wanted to play in that environment. And I mean, you could tell just from Jimmy's post-game conference or interview with Tyler Marion, the boys didn't really take this one seriously. Offensively, at least. Defensively, the defense played well. I mean, they didn't get over 100 yards of offense until like late in the third quarter. The game was never really a concern that we were going to lose, but I look at this game. A lot of guys had bad games. The Hogs didn't look great. Mark certainly didn't have his best performance. The receivers weren't getting separation. Offensively, it was just a mess. Amar looked great. The running backs looked great. Just didn't get the passing game going. The play calling was just befuddling. I didn't really get it. It felt like the coaches didn't have a game plan for it. And the play calls have felt clunky before, and it feels like the 2OC system maybe is struggling to get a rhythm. It doesn't feel like the offense has really had a great rhythm yet to it. That's something that's got to get figured out sooner than later before that becomes a real problem. But that's just my opinion. But as far as this game goes, I mean, if you're a Jacks fan who is up on the ledge, let me tell you, relax. Personal opinion is relax, because are you going to believe that an offense that even not looking great against Big 12 title contender still statistically matched them in yards, and then went against Incarnate Word, put up 500 yards of offense, never punted until really late in the game when they basically decided they wanted to punt. You can believe that that is the offense we have when the defense was a concern, or you can believe that in a game against a D2 school, all of a sudden that's the real Jackrabbits. That's the real team. We need to be concerned about it. I kind of believe the prior. You're supposed to slap them. Yep, I absolutely agree. Kevin says what he's supposed to do against D2 is what the big blue machine, the Citadel Bulldogs, did today. Yes, you're supposed to slap a D2. I'm not making excuses. If somebody wants, if you're doing rankings, if you're a pollster like Zach and Kevin, Sam, and all those guys, I have no problem with people dropping the Jacks below Montana State and Idaho and all that stuff. That's absolutely justified. You got to go off of the results so far this year, and this was not a good result. From an SDSU fan perspective, I'm not going to lose sleep over this game. Somebody mentioned earlier here, Chris Howard mentioned just flush it and move on to the next. I fully agree. I don't, as a fan, flush it. I don't think the boys are going to get a chance to flush it. You do that sort of celebration that they did, that Tanner Castor was showing on Twitter, asking what people think about it against the D2 team. I think that was in the third quarter, and you really struggled offensively ahead of time, and then you don't score again. I don't think Jimmy's going to let anybody flush that. That's for sure. Ryan Drake says, burn the black jerseys, never to be worn again. I am also on that team. It just feels that the black jerseys and the blackout, I don't know why, every time the team comes out flat, there's no arguing that they came out flat. If you're watching a game, one of my key signs, if it's a top ranked team facing an underdog like tonight, or you're facing a non-ranked team in conference or whatever, the biggest sign to me that a team is not locked in is an immediate special teams screw up, like a fumble on special teams when they did the exact same kickoff that Incarnate Word had done to us, and then we fumbled the ball to them immediately. That's just a quick sign that, boy, not locked in. The team just really wasn't locked in. Didn't look good. And I don't think the offense ever really did end up getting locked in. It felt like eventually the offensive coordinators were just like, you know what, passing game doesn't have it. We're just going to run the ball, and got a bunch of yards. I did like what we saw of the running backs. Woods, dude, that kid is going to be something. Before I realized, like, Angel didn't warmed up and then came out in sweats and stuff like that, I thought maybe they were looking for him to be almost. We've been thinking that the Jacks need like a thunderback to come in off of Angel and Amar, but I thought they were pulling a fast one and going, we're going to go with this kid who is the shiftiest thing you've ever seen, and going more scat back as our change of pace guy. And he looked really good. That was a lot of fun to watch him shooting around out there. That was great. Seth says, some of the game penalties, players out with injuries. Augustana was able to get pressure before. We couldn't run the ball consistently. Augustana was able to play zone, take away a deep threat throwing the ball. Mark didn't play his best game by a long shot. Southern Illinois looks like the most complete team right now. I disagree about Southern Illinois. They did fine against Incarnate Word. I don't agree that they look like the most complete team. If you want to talk about in the Valley, we want to talk about most complete teams, we could argue that it's probably UND right now who looks like the most complete team. But then again, I would also say, let me see them win a game outside of the Alaris against somebody good first. But yeah, the amount of penalties was wild. Doing that sort of celebration after a touchdown when you've been clunky all game, that really was a surprise to me. And Jimmy did not like it. You could tell from his post-game interview. It really just wasn't great. Dan Furman says, we left some horses in the stable and weren't going to show anything on the offensive side. Looked like anyone was slightly dinged up, didn't play today. That's true. I mean, that is true. But that being said, even if that's the case, the offense should have performed better. I mean, whether you're trying to show anything or not. You've already shown things first off against Incarnate Word and against Oklahoma State. I mean, shoot, we were doing the Chase Mason packages of both those games. Like, we're not gonna. You can at least use some of those playbook. It's honestly felt a little bit, or a lot of it, like when an FBS team plays an FCS team, just doesn't put in a game plan and they just go to run their base plays. Ron saying UND has confidence. Yeah, they can have all the confidence in the world. They also have a record of like 6 wins and 20 some losses in the last 3 or 4 years outside of the Alaris. So I don't really give a rip how much confidence they have. They're to the point where they have to prove it a little bit here. And as we wait for Borg here, just some wild results in the Valley. I mean, Youngstown loses to Duquesne. What? How does that make sense? NDSU pulls a rabbit out of their hat against ETSU, which was wild. Everybody thought ETSU had that wrapped up. Onside kick hits the ETSU hands team in the chest, bounces over to NDSU, and then Cam Miller marches him down the field, scores the game-winning touchdown. ETSU throws a pick with 50 seconds on there. They got the ball back with like 50 seconds and trying to drive to get the game-time field goal. They threw an interception, just couldn't close that game out. Wild. Football, man, it's something. And then Murray State actually goes out and lays the wood to somebody. I mean, the fact that it was anybody, if Murray State was playing a high school team, I wouldn't expect them to put up 59 points. But they did it against Mississippi Valley State, which absolutely says a lot more about Mississippi Valley State than it does Murray State, because Jesus Christ. And the big news is USD ends up having their game against Portland State canceled, which is breathtaking, for whooping cough. Wild. Just wild. Right, Drake says, can we get a tight end at least, a tight end at least once a drive? Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. It does feel like from the stands, they look like they're open. I don't know how accurate my eyes are on that stuff. Maybe there's just not that. It feels like there's not that chemistry there with them and Mark. And the game plan just, I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to show that. But anyways, the man, the myth, the legend is here. Assimilate with the Borg. He has arrived from doing his daytime Emmy winning show. I don't know if I just like to say it. What's up, Borg? Welcome in. I'm tired of blabbing by myself here, so you can take the floor a little bit from what you said. To me, this was a super flat performance from the Jacks. And I honestly, offensively, defense looked fun. I thought the defense was fun. Jesus, they got him down to their 4th-string quarterback. It was actually pass rush, and they were getting heat on him. Didn't allow anything in that game. But offensively, and it felt like from the offensive coordinators down, it felt like nobody was ready for this game. And I don't know. It was like they thought they could just roll out their helmets and put up points. Technically, it was true, but by God, was it ugly.
Yeah, I'm guessing. First, I'm guessing you plugged our sponsors, so I will say thanks to them right now.
Yes.
How long have you been on? By the way, I've been obviously
coming up on 15 minutes.
Well, good job carrying it down, man. It's obviously been rather busy nights. So hope you guys are. Is my stream sounding okay too? I'm a little.
That sounds good. I think we had better success when you didn't have the earbuds in, though. It gets echoey when you have the earbuds, but it wasn't.
Well, I've also just retweeted it too, so I don't know if that maybe affected it. Let me try again.
Yeah, maybe. Well, it sounds good now.
Okay, well, I also just retweeted something on there too. So, but yeah, no, I think I was gonna say I was wondering for a second if you might have had some whooping cough there too. I know I think that's what I put on my little tagline here, and Lord knows I can't. I'm kind of almost hoping the CSU football coach gets whooping cough tonight. That wouldn't be a bad thing. That's what I would have preferred to put in my tagline tonight. But it's just kind of hey, no problem, Seth. Thanks for glad to see you last night. Glad to see you kind of one of my fun parts of Friday is I don't necessarily stick around in Sioux Falls. I like to kind of go around the state a little more to the smaller ones. But yeah, this was it's just funny how every time you think on a Saturday around here, every time you think it's going to be a nothing burger of a week, something ends up happening. And this was, of course, now I talk about whooping cough, and I have my cough, which has been on and off for the last week. No, I think, yeah, I would rather, I'm reading this message, they will have to beat out. Well, I don't know. I mean, we'll see how the rest of the night develops, or the rest of the season develops. I mean, that could come back to bite them. Portland State was not going to be they've not been a good team since before the pandemic. So we'll discuss that later. That could come back to bite them if they're a fringe playoff team or if in seeding. I think that's more of a seeding issue for them. But I think for tonight with SDSU Augustana, you can certainly tell. I said this first when I tweeted it. I think my three kind of, I don't want to say they were my takeaways, but I think number one, you do have to give you have to give some respect to Augustana. They played hard. I think that's we touched on this a little bit last night, but as I have an SDSU helmet popping up on whatever program I have over my head, it's, as I said last week, it's not the dregs of Division II, and I'm not knocking USD. It's not Northern. Northern State was starting completely over this year with like 50 freshmen or something, and they're 0-3. Augie's had Jerry Shevsky's been there for more than, now that Stig's retired, he's the longest tenured coach in the state. So he's got the program there on solid footing. They know what they are. They've got South Dakota kids. They just came off the best season in their program's history. Granted, they're on their level. They're a little like SDSU in that they're kind of starting over in places. But they also have a lot of South Dakota kids on that roster. You knew they were going to just ball out. And, of course, Canyon Bauer, the ex-Jackrabbit, he might have led them in receptions tonight. I'm going to have to check out the statistic here. I've got the numbers up on my computer now. But
are you sure you didn't give Portland State whooping cough?
I've thought about it. I definitely had a little bit of a cough. I'm pretty sure that was my lead, I think, on one of my lines tonight. I'm like, you would think whooping cough would shut down a daycare, not a Division I football team. And I'm just, that's been another thing. I've been kind of back and forth with the USD athletic director today, trying to figure out, because when this broke, you have to get a comment from the guy. But I also kind of wanted to go, okay, did you guys, because we got the statements from South Dakota, from Portland State, that the doctors had been in consult with it. There's always the two sides of it. I want to know, did South Dakota want the game canceled too? Who are the two sides of this? Who did they mutually want to end this when they found out that one side was sick? And South Dakota, my impression is they made it clear to me they wanted to play this game. They were ready to play this game. They wanted to play it. I think whatever as it said in the release from Portland State, nobody was seriously ill on their team. So South Dakota wanted to play despite whatever was present, and they didn't play.
So what we don't get from the statements is the tone. How angry was USD's AD about it?
I don't know either, because I was just text messaging with him. So gotcha. I think there's I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't think anyone's happy over there. I don't. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. But if I were them, I would say there is a return game scheduled. Now, this game was scheduled before he took over as athletic director. This was in the Herbster era. There is a return game scheduled for 2030. So, who knows? I mean, that might be in some jeopardy depending on how this if I were them, I would seek a lot of reimbursements over this because, and you have Portland State saying they knew about this 2 days ago. I mean, I guess we'll find out if they informed US. We know USD was out there yesterday. I think there were pictures of them out there yesterday. Did they tell USD before they traveled out there? I mean, this isn't. I just don't. I mean, I guess USD would have probably still maybe gone anyway, but I mean, this will probably be more handled by the news than the sports at some point because now USD moves on to play Drake, who, oh, by the way, is maybe the best Pioneer League team and just beat it at full. That's maybe not the gimme that it normally is. I mean, you'd think they should still win, but it's like they just did beat a scholarship team, so you have to, and especially after what we just saw tonight, it's like, you can't necessarily take any. I'm sure Nielsen will show them the tape of what happened tonight in Brookings and say, hey, if you don't take everybody seriously, anything can happen, along with what happened in Cheney last week. But I do believe they're pretty livid down in, and I mean, that was their main concern tonight, was just getting, like Matt's saying, Matt Kearney, you've got the travel expenses. You go up there. If they knew about this 2 days ago, that's the one thing I didn't ask at the time. Maybe I should have. I kind of need to go back to my phone here because, like I said, it was kind of a difficult process. And never did I think I would be on this stream talking about USD, right? We talk all the FCS. Right. Primarily, it's SDSU. This is the Jackrabbit Illustrated thing. So, and we didn't think the SDSU game would be very compelling, which it was for different reasons.
Well, we're more fair than we get credit for.
By the way, NDSU, who was a 27, 18, something or other point favorite, was down by 12, makes a miracle comeback. So, but, knowing that fan base, that might feel more like a loss to them. I don't know how that's. And we've had another monumental realignment thing. I mean, and so needless to say, and of course, it's a busy day in the sports world locally that I cover. So, I mean, this has just been, like I said, that's kind of maybe we always kind of look for an overarching thing at the start of the day. What looked like it was just going to be a nothing burger of a week turned into one of the most bizarre, memorable weeks I think we're ever going to have. Yep. Not necessarily because of the games, but, there were certainly some interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the one game that didn't get played could have the longest lasting. I kind of wonder if this is something, and we've talked a little. Ron mentions it's a glorified high school team in the comment down there. My question with Portland State, and we were kind of throwing this around in some of the talks about what could the realignments look like. We know Eastern Washington is struggling financially. Portland State, I think, is in that same boat. I think
Eastern
USD
Washington's overblown because they've got a couple of professors that every year try to get them to cut athletics and then give them.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that a week ago. Yeah.
But Portland State, I don't know what their deal is there.
Well, I remember pre-pandemic they had a pretty good run. I remember there was one year they were a seeded team, and I remember Northern Iowa went up there and beat them. I think they were a seeded team. It was like 2018, 17.
That was like a flash in the pan. It was almost for them and USD were kind of similar timing, and both of them had historically in FCS just been bad, and then had a good year and then tanked.
USD, you knew there was more funding. It's not in a pro town. Obviously, Portland has the Trailblazers, and that soccer team is very good. The soccer up there with the Timber Rattlers, I think is their name. That's a pro town, and plus you have the Ducks and the Beavers. Portland State is a non-starter. They're not going to get any. At least with USD, there's going to be some alumni. As much as I know Jackrabbit fans are going to joke about some of the things that go on there, there's at least a base there, and they're going to be funded, and they're not going to drop their football program. Portland State, I think, is in that boat. I think this was the first time I had looked it up. I don't remember exactly. they hadn't hosted an FCS a Division I FCS team in non-conference since before the pandemic. Like you look at them, they've been playing like 2 FBS games a year, and that's basically to pay the bills, I think, at this point. Which that's not unique. There's a lot of, X team is playing 2 FBS games a year. I don't know if that doesn't mean they're necessarily poor, but a lot of,
well, X
teams,
that's a unique case because they had a lot of those contracts signed before they dropped down from FBS, and that's why they're making so much on those games, because they were signed as an FBS team. FBS teams are more for those.
We're seeing Northern Iowa play. Northern Iowa is going to play 2 a year. There's a lot of cash-strapped programs right now in the FCS.
Yep.
But I think with Northern Iowa, or not Northern Iowa, Portland State, I looked at the last couple of years, they're playing like an NAIA or a D2 or something for their home opener every year. And then they get in their Big Sky schedule. But South Dakota was the first FCS team that they had hosted for a home opener at least before the pandemic. So clearly they weren't, I don't know how the guarantee structure works. We know how hard it is to get teams to come up here for games for either state or U. So I would think South Dakota, if Portland State refuses to pay, is going to take some legal recourse to try and get something back out of this. That's just, I don't know that for a fact. That's me. This is me opinion. I don't have that on record or anything. I don't know what they're going to do there. But if South Dakota tries to take them for a ride over this, and they're already this cash strap, how much longer is that program going to exist if you can't control a whooping cough outbreak? What is it? What kind of a Division I program gets shut down by whooping cough? I know I heard some other people who were like, how do you not get vaccinated as a kid for whooping cough? I'm not going to get political, but that's like one of the ones that I think got wiped out. I feel like that's one that got wiped out. That feels like one we should have gotten wiped out in the dark ages or the 20s or something. I just don't know how that program is going to continue when you have something like that go on. There had to be maybe a little excitement for this USD, similar, not different levels, but obviously what you had with NDSU going to East Tennessee State today, like that's a big moment for that program to bring a caliber of that program in. Again, different levels because Portland State just doesn't have that kind of interest in that market. But you're finally bringing in a full-blooded FCS program and one that is ranked in the top 10 in USD. And you can't imagine if East Tennessee State had canceled that game for, I don't know, if they had a mass outbreak of diarrhea. What are we talking about? Say, okay, we'll talk the FBS stuff, I'm sure, soon.
Before we get to the FBS stuff and everything, the whole Portland State story is wild. On the Jacks game tonight.
Let's get back to that.
Before we get too into the weeds on everything else, what really
it's coming.
Yeah, there'll be plenty of it, I'm sure. What really stuck out to me was how much this meant to Augie fans and how much you could tell it meant. You could see they came out, they were jacked up. Yeah, and there was a lot of Augie fans. Not like they took over the stadium or anything, but honestly, there was probably more Augie fans than any non-marker game crowd that I can remember. You've seen where we sit. We're right in the front row of the visitors section, and they were loud. Yeah, they were loud. They were rowdy. They were having a blast. You could tell they had the vibe of SDSU fans when we go to Big Ten, we go to Iowa or Oklahoma State or whatever. That you could tell this was their game, and I think just from our fans and from maybe the team perspective, that was underestimated a little bit how much that meant, because we've had Lindenwood, whatever. It's their fans show up and they're like, oh yeah, when Lindenwood was D2 or transition, like, oh, this is a big deal, but it wasn't. It's not the same vibe. These Augie fans,
and also farther to travel, needless to say.
Right. Yeah. Not that travel notwithstanding, you could tell it was a party for them, and they were fun to be around. They were a blast. There was more shit talk comments than I expected. That kind of took me by surprise. I'm a post D2 SDSU child here, so I didn't have any Augie. I'm from Wisconsin. I didn't know any of this stuff. So that kind of took me a little. I understood it, but it took me a little off guard. I'm like, you talking shit right now, really?
I'll tell you a story. I was because again, with everything that was going on with USD, and then I was shooting the USF home opener, stopped by the Sanford International Golf Tournament, and then anyways, I was running late. I didn't get here as early as I did. I basically was walking in as they were kicking the game off. I heard, I could hear. I parked right one of the lots to the side of the indoor complex. So I heard SDSU wins the coin. Won the coin. I think Augie won the coin toss and deferred, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
I heard
it's hard to hear right now. The ref system's not very good for whatever reason. Doing what they say.
I heard it clear enough that I knew SDSU was getting the kickoff.
Yeah. And
I heard a cheer, and I thought, oh, it sounds like maybe something good happened for SDSU. It wasn't a thunderous roar like it would have been if it was a touchdown or something. But I thought, okay, SDSU must have had a nice tackle or something. I get in there and Augustana's got the football at the 20. And I realized, I'm like, that was Augustana fans making that. I couldn't believe that. I'm like, wow, and it continued during the game. I'm like, there are way more Augustana fans than I thought were going to be here. That's not because I didn't think Augustana fans weren't interested or wouldn't. I mean, we just know how big of a ticket SDSU football has been. Certainly in the right. I mean, we even the playoffs, we've seen more of people, but to get a ticket, for SDSU in the regular season when the weather's nice, I mean, you guys have been selling everything out. That was shocking to me to see that many Viking fans got in.
Well, in retrospect, I should have kind of seen this coming personally. And it's funny that there was that many compared to when SDSU plays USD fans. But that kind of tells you the magnitude of the game from an Augustana perspective. But also what tells you that is when I looked at SeatGeek, which is SDSU's official, secondhand market site and all that stuff. It's where everybody gets their tickets there. The most expensive game on SeatGeek was the Augie game. And that's not driven by SDSU fans alone because, yeah, SDSU fans, pretty cool, it's pretty neat, but that was Augie fans hounding to get into that game. Made a big difference on that, I think, because it was worth it to them to spend that money to get into that game. And when you drove in where the free lots are over by Hanson, I mean, they had tailgates set up almost to the level that NDSU does for those. So good for them. That was awesome. And it was also interesting talking to a fair amount of them. We're like, yeah, I usually come and cheer for the Jacks, but the guy who was sitting behind me, he goes, yeah, I usually come cheer for the Jacks, but my daughter's dating a guy for Augie, so I'm here as an Augie guy, and he had Augustana stuff on and was loud for him and all that stuff. And I love when the opposing fans are loud. I mean, that's what you're there for. Be loud. I hate because we're very loud when we're over there. And I hate when we're really loud and then they're really quiet. It's like, no, we're here for a football game. We're not here for a church, sermon. But yeah, that was really interesting, and I think that got underestimated in a lot of ways.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not trying to knock USD fans, but I'm like, that was louder than some USD fans when I've been to USD State. Now some of that too is because USD hadn't been very good going into some of those state. I mean, I'm hoping this year, especially with a national TV game. If there's a good contingent of USD fans, they're a little more into it. But yeah, like, the game 2 years ago when USD was, whatever, they were 1-3 on their way to that 3-9 season. They're obviously not going to be that many people going up there to watch them probably get killed. That's been the case a couple times. But yeah, I think, and I wasn't here during the D2 days, but there are still a lot of people who I think, it was fun. I did a preview story on them. It was a preview of the game, but it wasn't a hardcore. And we never really do a ton of hardcore X's and O's because, it's just not really, I don't really like doing that every single week because that just kind of you kind of know the teams after a point. You know what everybody's going to do. But we kind of as much focus on some of the history, a little bit of the history. Talked a lot with Canyon Bauer, who he wasn't just some part-time. He wasn't just, a freshman who played. He had some significant minutes with SDSU. He was just buried behind the Yankees. He was never going to play that much. And then, of course, maybe he saw this Wildy kid was coming on too. And then, you kind of see that. But, that old video I dug up out of the archive, which was just essentially the last state Augie game, which was 2004, which was actually when SDSU was their first full Division I schedule. So they weren't even it wasn't technically the last NCC game, but it was actually the last game of the season in 2004. Yeah, I can appreciate losing a voice a little bit. I needed more water. That's where the cough's been more tonight. I just haven't drank enough water today. But that was that was actually the last game of Jim Heinitz's coaching era, and he's as of now their winningest coach. Although the current one, Oshevsky, is going to pass on, barring something disastrous. But and Heinitz was an SDSU alum, I believe, or he played for him at least. I'm assuming he graduated. But I'd shown the 2004, which was the last meeting, and then I showed 2002, which was Augie's last win, triple overtime win at Howard Wood Field, which is a throw. I mean, tells you how much time has passed. In 20 years, neither of the stadiums they play at anymore are their home stadiums. Coughlin's gone, and they don't play. Augie hasn't played at Howard Wood Field in over a decade. So I posted those videos, and I think Augustana has had more views, likes, and retweets than SDSU, which is pretty rare. Usually, like the SDSU stuff I post gets sent out. I'm like, I've never seen Augustana fans post more, like.
I do know
something like that.
Zimmer's gone on his pod with John Gaskins and said the vast majority of his, by a lot of interactions, likes, and views and everything of his articles is SDSU. And then it's followed by Augie and USF and then USD.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too because, and I've said this several times.
He said Augustana. Augustana instead of Augustana. He said Augustana, which it's not terrible. I just got a kick out of it. He's very Southern. Because I've said this several times. I think it was kind of my lead, part of my lead tonight was this is one of the times where realignment kind of, a conference we can kind of call this a realignment of sorts 20 years ago when SDSU and NDSU moved up, and obviously later on USD and UND left, and that ended up being the final blow that knocked the NCC down. But this is one of the few times where maybe a realignment actually, even though it killed those rivalries, which I understand people who still have love for that era, Augustana and SDSU were not. They had moments, and SDSU I know was a 7-8 winish team at times, but they were probably never going to be a national in that form. Although, the way Division II kind of devolved, maybe they would have been who knows? Maybe things would have been differently. I mean, they just got out, but they were never very successful each. But the priority when I talked to people was we knew we were never going to win national titles like North Dakota State
or even North Dakota as UND got better. So the priority was just always to beat each other. It was to beat Augie, beat USD, or if you're or vice versa if you're at one of those schools. So the thing of it is with SDSU and Augustana, moving apart made them both better. They became champions at their own levels. Augustana is not quite at a national championship level yet. I don't know if they're going to quite get there in Division II, but they're certainly a contender in their champion in their conference year in and year out. And
they're way better than they ever D2 prior.
Yeah, they're far better. They would, yeah. So I mean, and obviously we know what SDSU's done. You know, and yeah, I mean, I know even USD, where if they continue on their path of what we saw a year ago. I know USD had that run in the mid 80s, but other than that, I mean, in the Dakotas, I think you can argue that the moves to Division I have greatly improved almost every level of college football. Maybe, yeah, I don't think there's any question, because it was just never, you know, maybe USF in 1996 when they won their first NAIA title, but even they had more success in the mid 2000s. So, yeah, I think this is one of the few cases where a realignment in a lower level had a lot of trickle down in South Dakota.
Well, the argument can be made that when there was that many Division II schools, that it created a log jam that didn't allow any separation there, where you didn't get the best of D2 level on one team. So then you split it off. You get, you get SDSU at the top taking the top talent and getting FCS top end talent, and then USD's getting some better talent. But then it leaves the good D2 players who probably would have gone to, been spread out over those schools, and then the top talent that SDSU and USD are getting would have gone out of state to wherever, walk on at Minnesota, Iowa, stuff like that. So now you've got those concentrated into Augie and USF locally, and allows those to pruning back bushes. They get too overgrown, everything kind of dies and fights itself, and then you do that.
Yeah, I think I think another nice thing that maybe helped SDSU grow was the fact you had a playoff system that was not regionally based, and you could get at-large bids into. I mean, it's all, with the playoff, as much as we can kind of debate, and of course they expanded the FCS playoffs, which is for better and worse. Sometimes you can make an argument there are too many teams in. Of course, now we've had so many teams leave that the quality at times has maybe gone down a little bit, but either way, I still remember this from the first year I was out here, when you had, I think it's one point just 6 teams per region making the playoff, and you had like 3 different conferences. That first year I was out here, I remember Sioux Falls went 10-1. Their one loss was to Mankato, who went undefeated, and they didn't make the playoff. Think about if SDSU went 10-1 and didn't make a playoff. That would be. But I think there were years SDSU was a 7 or an 8 win team in D2 and never made the playoffs. What would it have done to their momentum? Would they have been a better program in Division II if they could have gotten an at-large bid into a Division II playoff? Maybe they get more players because, hey, at least you can say we're making the playoffs every year. I think that was still a key when they didn't have the stadium here, when they didn't have the indoor facility. When those weren't even, as those were still concepts on the drawing board, at least you'd say, hey, we made the playoffs. We won a playoff game. This is the momentum we have that we're building. And then you add everything that else started to come along. So, yeah, I think that. But, it's just like I said, I think, and sometimes, I think the alignment, it's kind of amazing. Like I said, I know each fan base will certainly kind of focus on their own product, but when you look at how good, especially last year, not every level. I mean, not every team in South, but we certainly had a lot of success across the board last year. Even if you look I know the Iowa side of it with NAIA, but Northwestern's had a heck of it. And also it just kind of evened out things, because even with August, even with USF, USF moving into Division II, it just maybe that kind of opened the door for the Morningsides and the Northwesterns to finally have a little more competitive balance, so that they weren't constantly getting kicked in the teeth by Sioux Falls. So yeah, I think that, and if we ever see some of these Dakota schools move on to whatever another level is, it wouldn't necessarily hurt the FCS, but whatever's left. But that's another discussion we'll have soon. I guess to wrap up kind of the Augustana SDSU thing, I think my other two thoughts that I didn't get to before we kind of got on the whole give Augustana their respect. And I have a lot of respect. I said this last week. I have a lot of respect for Jerry Shevsky. That dude's a very good football coach. I'm a little surprised he never went to another level, because he came to them from Gustavus, Division III. I thought maybe, I don't know how young he is now. He's been there now over a decade. I thought maybe he would want to move on to an FCS program, but he's been there so long now, I kind of think maybe he's just going to stay at Augie. But I think the other two things that I thought were, as much as the offense struggled, that was a pretty basic offensive game plan. Compare it to what they ran with Incarnate Word. That was vanilla ice cream. I mean, you didn't see any Chase Mason. Now, I don't know what the injury situation was. Again, I've been running around today, so we didn't see any Angel Johnson. I don't know if there's something
Angel there. I know I was told he warmed up and then he came out in sweats after the warm-up. So I'm wondering if
there was some injuries.
Chase.
I don't know if these are injuries or if they just are like, well, do we want to – I don't know. But, I mean, if there's no point in risking guys for a game like this where you figure you're going to win regardless. But, like I said, the defense was fine. I think the defense gave you everything you wanted. But I think if they had really been that concerned with what they were seeing, they would have done more creative stuff. Like, if they were worried, oh my God, we are going to lose this game, or we have a significant problem, they're throwing deep. They're taking some kind of deep shot to Wildy. They're bringing, they're going to bring something more creative. Because this was just kind of get out of here and don't put anything on tape by the end of it. Although I certainly felt for Augie, because they were down to a fourth-string quarterback at the end. So some of that might have been for Augie's sake too, and out of respect for Jerry that they didn't. But again, this is not to excuse SDSU, because I think there are still some. I heard you mentioning when it came in the tight ends. A little concerned about that, because we saw some promise last week, but you can still see that the chemistry may not be there yet. And you do have to start getting it there at some point, because we're getting a little later into this thing. You want to hopefully have it as we're starting to get along that marker game. Because non-conference only tells you so much. You'll really learn what your team is when you're playing the teams who know you. And that the real game really starts at Northern Iowa in October when the conference play begins.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. The chemistry just isn't there on the tight end front yet. I don't know if that's because there's so many of them that it makes it difficult for Mark to get the chemistry that, you have with a Kraft when he's the guy, and then Hines because he's the guy. I don't know if that plays into it. I don't know if that is just me making shit up. But it's certainly a possibility to me where, you see the chemistry with Griffin, you see the chemistry with Goring, you see those things where we kind of knew those were going to be the 1 and 2 guys. So those are the guys Mark has chemistry with. That's, how they've been running it. So I'm curious if that has a little effect on it. I do. Are we pretty much done with the Augie game then?
I'd say maybe two other quick
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
Not the worst thing in the world that they had this game, because I have a feeling I don't profess to know Jimmy that well. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that he can lay into them for a week.
Yeah.
Like not that I'm not trying to paint him as sadistic or anything like that, but having a reason to, I know if we said last week or Oklahoma State was humbling, he's going to put them through a little. This is humbling for them. I mean, this was, he said the right things about how you can't, classification doesn't matter. People can play at any level. He said that in his press conference this week. He gave Augustana all the respect in the world. Basically, they're in the position we were when we went down to Oklahoma State. Essentially, I'm kind of paraphrasing there. But I'm sure, I remember, I think Stig told me this once, like, as a coaching staff, we can say whatever we want. It's still 60 individuals getting on a bus. You can't control. They still are going to do what they're going to do. You never know what, especially in some of these games. It's human nature. And not all of these guys, the South Dakota guys, probably know a little more about Augie, but I'm sure some of them were looking past this game.
Everybody knows that has a teenager, preteen, or has been around a teenager knows that you can try to pound a point into their head as much as you want. And if they don't, you can still not get it home. And what was interesting to me was Jimmy's comments with Tyler post-game, and I'm paraphrasing, this could be wrong, but it was along the lines of, he said, Southeast Louisiana is definitely capable of competing to win against us, and we need to convince ourselves, we need to be convinced of that, or something along those lines, which I found interesting because that sounded to me like, yeah, we weren't, it felt like he had the vibe that we weren't as locked in as we should have been on this game, is kind of what I picked up from that.
I'll sound the alarm on that. I know Sela has not been what they had been in the past, but there is some history of playoff with them. It's going to be a swampy, weird weather environment, perhaps. I'm not calling it a trap game, but this is still a team that's developing some chemistry on the offensive side. There are some offensive injuries on the line. I know that was maybe one thing I heard from some fans coming out of the spring game was, hey, the number one offensive line looks good, but I'm not so sure about the depth behind it. That might have come a little bit to the forefront today. It's still a game. Don't call him Sela. Okay, I won't call him Sela. Might get me in trouble if I go down there on.
They get mad about it. I call him Sela the same way I call Twitter instead of X, but they're SLU official.
I got bad news for Elon. Everybody calls X Twitter, so he might. We'll see about that one. I'm not too afraid about Elon docking me on that one. Hopefully, he's got better things to worry about than what one idiot sportscaster in Sioux Falls is saying about his app. But that could be a trap. I'm not going to call it a trap game, but anytime you go on the road, just look what happened to SDSU tonight. Anytime you go onto the road to a weird environment, things could happen. So
yep.
I think the one thing that did stand, so like I said, I think it's not necessarily the worst thing that Jimmy Rogers has as a good reason to lay into his team, because we talked about potentially the humbling aspects of the last 2 weeks. Tonight was humbling. And this week, I have a feeling will be humbling in a way this team's never had, because I have a feeling he might run them. He's not going to kill them because they got a season left and they got a game ahead, but he's going to humble them, I think, in a way that I think you couldn't humble them for losing to an FBS team. You couldn't humble them for Well, you got to win tonight, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, you want respect.
We love Jaden
Jones. You've got to not lose the Butler if you want respect. I'm sorry.
We like Jaden Johansson. We love Sioux Falls kid. We hope he's playing quarterback. So he's a good kid. Just keep fighting. Hopefully things go well. The one other thing I did like was I did really like some of the new guys that quote unquote new guys. The Kobe. I'm forgetting his name right now. Humphrey. What's his first name?
Colby. Yes.
Humphrey.
Yeah,
Colby, the tackle, and I singled this kid out when I was at practice.
His interception should be Sports Center top 10.
I put that in my highlight. I'll be posting those in a bit. That was incredible. Yeah. But also the defensive tackle from Northwest, the transfer they got. The little guy, the little defensive tackle. I'm blanking on the names because it's been a long ass day.
I'm never good with names. I'm the worst with names. Matt Tollefson, he's the one who.
No, he's Kobe. He's 94. Kobe Claiborne. That dude, I singled him out. I saw him at the first practice I went to. He's the transfer from Northwest Missouri State. Kind of reminds me of Caleb Sanders size-wise, but the dude had an incredible motor at practice. And, we both have whooping cough. Yep, I've had one. Yeah, whatever.
I have daycare cough. I have a 6-month-old who started going to daycare 2 months ago, and it's just been every other week of getting sick.
Well, if anyone on this chat or watching on Twitter or wherever when this gets logged into podcast, anyone who has a kid knows a kid is a petri dish. So I'm pretty sure I picked mine up from my son. If this is the worst thing I pick up, I mean, I do have to keep an eye on my health because I had my pneumonia thing around the time they went to the championship game that put me in that was a variety of things. So I do have to keep an eye on it, but I would know if I were short of breath. This is different than that. This is me being kind of parched and having a throat thing too. But like I said, anyone who has a kid knows that that kid is a petri dish, and you're the experiment when they come home. So, but no, I think Claiborne, that guy, he's going to be, I think, a really big player for them. I don't, they rotate so much in the line, but that dude's like a firecracker, and he had some really nice plays tonight. And this is a name that we heard and we all had fun with because of the recruiting battles and how much we know it. Well, they love it up north. Maxwell Woods made his debut for the Jackrabbits tonight. And, boy, that first series we saw him, I know it ended on a bit of a down note when they had that turnover on downs, but and, of course, remember that rule where you can play 4 games and still save your red shirt. They might have a little bit of a decision on whether they want to save his red shirt. We'll see. But Maxwell Woods, he had that 45-yard run.
The depth in that running back room is just insane.
But I think his final numbers – remember, Amar Johnson ran for 126 yards. Good game. I remember on the radio broadcast as I was driving back, Tyler was saying the surprising thing is you knew the burst. You knew that Amar's been running more physical this year, which is nice to see. But he was your leading rusher. And we didn't see Angel. I don't know if it's an injury thing or they just held him out or who knows. Maybe ask that about Jimmy on the press conference, although if it's an injury thing, I don't know if we'll get much disclosed. But second leading rusher is Maxwell Woods with 6 carries for 61 yards.
Yeah.
So now 45, 44 comes on 1 carry. But very impressive, I thought, debut. He didn't look lost. He didn't really do much after the first series, but they didn't necessarily – not like they were going every down with him. But, actually the series they did go, he was pretty much every down with him. But that might be a kid – I think Jimmy hinted when they recruited him, he's Mr. Football from Minnesota. And, of course, he originally committed to SDSU and famously flipped, which was just big news. I could hear the nuclear bomb go off in Fargo when that happened. So yeah, that was huge. I mean, that's an interesting part of the future. That's maybe the one kind of thing I like. I always say this: you can never judge too much on your non-conference. Sometimes you see these little hints of maybe the future, and that might be whether it's now or years to come. Exciting little maybe tease for what we could see from him in the future.
Yep, reminds me a little bit not of the player, but just the excitement you got from watching Angel Johnson last year in some of these out-of-conference games. Quickly on Ron just running through the big sky on us. Weber State lost to Lamar, so let's relax on beating the drum for the big sky here. Idaho beat Albany. Yes, I don't think Albany's any good, so they're overrated in the polls because of what they did last year. That's just my opinion. They don't have much left from the team that did make the run to the semifinals, and I'm never sold on Nichols. So that's just my personal opinion. Michael from Murray State, you're going to beat two Valley schools this year. I hope you do. I do. I'm rooting for Murray State. If you saw our preview episode on Jackrabbit Illustrated, I picked you guys like 5th or 6th.
I like their coach.
They've just disappointed the hell out of me this year so far. He looks stupid. And I get 65 transfers trying to get it together.
Davis picked up a nice. Davis picked up a nice win today. 20. Yeah. I was gonna say Sela. Speaking of Sela, Southeast Louisiana. Speaking of the Jacks' opponent, next they beat Eastern Washington 28-24. Although Eastern Washington is fast circling the drain, but that game was in Hammond, Louisiana. And so I can't remember if somebody asked where that was or if I was.
They like to say Hammond, America down there.
Hammond, America. That came down to the end, though. That was not. So maybe this speaks to what Southeast is now, because obviously Eastern loses to Drake in overtime last week, the non-scholarship team. You have essentially the game was tied at half, and it goes to the fourth quarter. They're trailing 24-21. They hit a 23. Southeast hits a 23-yard touchdown run, like 7 seconds into the quarter, and that ends up being the difference in the game. So teams held off. I'm going to see if there was maybe a drive or something at the end. It looks like Southeast just basically held the ball for the rest of the game. They held the ball for 11 plays, 60 yards, and about 6 minutes of clock at the end. So, I mean, there was a 9-play, 54-yard drive from Eastern that ended on downs at the Southeast 18. So I'm trying to get a look here. A little advanced scouting. The Hammond Confederates. That's a little brutal, man. That might be a little. That's a deep cut. We're this day and age. I don't know if we want to be saying that. It's a little sensitive now. They did have again. This is a Big Sky team that is bad, unfortunately, because we have our good memories of Eastern Washington. But they had a running back by the name of Antonio Martin Jr., who went for 149 yards on 28 carries. They did not have much of a passing game, did Southeast. Quarterback Eli Sawyer, 12 of 21 for 72 yards, 2 touchdowns. But, I mean, I guess they obviously rely on their pass attack, or on the running game, but just not much of a pass game. I'm guessing it must have been just some short stuff. But their other games this year, this was Southeast's first win, by the way. They lost to FBS teams. Got beat 52-0 at Tulane and 35-10 Southern Miss. So there is your Jackrabbits early scouting report on the Southeast Louisiana Lions, who, if there's one unfortunate thing about because I don't feel, big yawn. If there's one unfortunate, And as a guy who covers everybody around here, so I do feel pretty good for I will confess I feel good for Augie that they didn't just get completely ass blasted. I'll use that term. I'm glad they put up a good showing, whether that would have, and a good showing could have still been 40-3, which is, put up a good showing. That's what I want to see. I didn't want to see like what happened in Northern, but I kind of knew what that was going to happen because they had so many young kids. But I think I just lost my train of thought. But no, I think, I forgot what I was going to say. But either way, it's time for reckless alignment. Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. It'll probably come along here. No, I think that's about it with.
I think Kevin's had enough SoCo for us to start that conversation. He's going to have a coronary.
I guess maybe the only other game to hit on, we talked obviously a lot about, for those who are joining in the party a little late, and I was late too. I was like 15 minutes. We did talk already about the wild whooping cough game, and it sounds like we have whooping cough, but we didn't get it from Portland State. I guess the one game we haven't touched on yet was probably the craziest game in terms of what was actually played on the field. State. And that will lead probably to some of this realignment talk because they, for better and worse, drive a lot of the conversation in the FCS. It was the North Dakota State East Tennessee State game, and that was something. Citadel Bulldog. I love your mascot. I love your school. Hey, I know we're on the Fans Nation thing, and I've occasionally gone back and forth, had some long arguments in the middle of the night with the SoCon guys.
Those are different, to be fair.
Yeah,
Kevin is FCS Nation Radio, and we're on the FCS Fans Nation Network.
Okay, you're right.
It does get confusing on Twitter, so I totally get it.
Well, I just lost my train of thought, so I'm very confused tonight, obviously. But it's late night, and my voice is
it is late night.
But
I mean, it is almost 1 in the morning, so
yeah.
We can save the reckless realignment talk for next weekend.
For sure.
Too, if we wanted to. I'm not saying we have to, but we can.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it's going to be there, and it's never going to go away. Never going to go away. But I definitely think we got to touch on the briefly on NDSU East Tennessee, because what was the line? I think they were 18 points. I mean, either way, the point I was making, respect to the SoCon. Sometimes I've ripped you guys. You get your flowers tonight. I know they couldn't finish it, but that atmosphere looked terrific, and that team balled out. I know it. Believe me, there are a lot of people, especially after a lot of stuff that was said from up north, that would have just laughed at the irony of a loss from the Bison, but also knowing Fargo, there's probably a panic button being hit that they played close. So,
well, they did go on record saying, certain people up there did go on record saying, you watch ETSU and NDSU and tell me there's anything in common between those two programs. Whoopsies.
Oops. Well, and again, a lot of that started because we're not getting into the realignment talk tonight, but it's always funny how anytime there's a realignment thing that comes up and the chatter gets started amongst the fans, amongst the media up there, the whole apparatus, the whole apparatchik. What's the Soviet? And it's a 26.5-point underdog. Thanks guys. 26-27. Thanks, Kevin. It was even more than I was giving it credit for. It wasn't 18. Good God, whoever said that line probably is people who took that line are feeling pretty bad tonight. But the whole apparatchik of the state. Anytime that happens, I swear they have a clunker. I don't know if they win. I'm not saying they lose, but and it inevitably filters down to the program. And do you think anyone's ever going to pick up on that? Like,
I think it's filtered down to just their fan base even showing up to games. I mean,
right.
They've had how many years of the media up there telling them that this level's no good, nobody's worth going to watch. All these teams, these games are no fun, and then they'll put out an article. Why is nobody showing up at the Fargo Dome? What do you think?
I mean, look, and they think. I mean, I've heard some things, and I'm a working professional in media. I'm not. I think some of them think I'm trashing them. I'm not, or that I don't enjoy them. I like their work. I listen. I consume it. I'm not trashing the work up there, but where I come at it from is I have lived in the group of 5. I've lived both working. Now I was student media, but to me that counts. I mean, shout out to student media at SDSU, USD, any student media that's watching from anywhere in the FCS. That's as if anybody's student media that's watching this, you count. You matter. You're putting in the hard work. I hope you get a professional shot, but you are putting in the work. But Colorado State, I'm going to talk about the game tonight, but I lived that life. I still am an alumnus of that Group of 5 thing. And even though I'm now a proud alum of the Conference of Champions, I don't anticipate it's going to change. I'm still going to be in the Group of 5 or 6 or whatever it ends up becoming. I don't anticipate this new Pac-12 is going to be the Power 4 or Power 5 again, unless the ACC implodes. I live this life. I've been to these bowl games. I remember I was listening to Dom's show, and they were talking about, we go to Frisco all the time. Can you imagine the anticipation of wondering which bowl game you would be going to in November? You could be going to the anticipation of going to St. Petersburg Bowl I'm like, I wanted to call him and say, none of us want to go to these bowl games. Once you are out of your conference title race, you're just like, well, we hope we go to a warm weather game. We hope we get, basically, if you're not in a position to win your conference title, you just hope you get to a bowl game, which, oh, by the way, getting to a bowl game is winning 6 games or maybe even winning 5 games, because now there's too many bowl games and too many teams can't get to 6 wins. So it's really not an accomplishment. You're rewarded for being a mediocre, crappy team. The last coach, one of the last coaches at CSU, the one who preceded the one that SDSU mopped the floor with when we went out there in 2019, that guy had like 3 consecutive 7-6 seasons. And then his final 2 years, he won 3 games. And the program has been cratering since. If we were in the FCS, or if we were in a playoff system where you weren't rewarded for going 7-6, where it wasn't a certainty that you were going to get a playoff bid, to be fair, 7-win teams do get in the playoffs, but it's not a guarantee.
Well, they can make it, but they'll get shellacked a lot of times.
True. Water. I'm kind of ranting. You can throw the rant on if you want. If we weren't constantly being rewarded for our mediocrity, that guy would have been fired. And we wouldn't be in this constant mess. Maybe we would have gotten out of it earlier. I don't know. But if they are telling people in Fargo that these bowl games are this paradise, the bowl games are bull crap. I'll tell you, when CSU was good, and there was a blessed time, when I was in school and about 100 pounds lighter, with 100 less bills to pay too, CSU won 3 Mountain West titles in 4 years. The last one came when I was a freshman. probably one of their best teams of all time. Bradley Van Pelt, Joel Drees, and Cecil Sapp. Look it up. Sonny Lubick. Best team. Beat Colorado, who was 5th ranked. Beat Virginia. Beat Louisville. One of the best schedules I've ever seen them play. Barely lost to Fresno State. Barely lost to UCLA. There was a rumor they were going to go to the Cotton Bowl, but they blew a game because they always blow a game at the end of the season. They ended up going to the Liberty Bowl for the 3rd time in 4 years. I hear these people in Fargo, I am so bored of going to the FCS National Championship game. We've been there 9 times. We are so sick of going. It's an actual championship game with stakes. I went to the championship game last year. That atmosphere was terrific. I realize only been to 2 of them if you're a Jackrabbit, or 3. But that's only the second one that had a full complement of fans. You're playing for something. The bowl games are nothing. They're exhibitions. You don't hang a banner. There's a freaking wall. There was a freaking wall. Hughes Stadium doesn't exist where I went to school. They got a new stadium. They painted a sign on a wall outside our stadium. There's no banner for winning the Liberty Bowl, but it was the same bowl game in the same site 3 times in 4 years. You want to tell me? Now, I know. Now, some schools treat it, if you're Wyoming, who at the time didn't go to a whole lot of bowl games, they treat it like it's a holy pilgrimage, and they're going to Mecca. And they'll send thousands of fans to go to the Potato Bowl or some crap. Great. And I'm sure NDSU, because you want to get out of Fargo in December, would send 7,000 people to Shreveport. Okay. And a lot of these FCS schools, when they first transition up, they get a lot of people to go to the first bowl game or the first 2 or the first 3. It's the sugar rush. It's new. It's exciting. What happens when you do it the second time and the third time and the fourth time and the 5th time? Because those bowl tie-ins stay. You don't really have much variety. The conferences kind of have a set roster. Maybe there's a little bit, but it's usually the same. If you're in Conference USA, you're more or less in the same 1 or 2 or 3. Somebody mentioned it down here. The Frisco Bowl is literally a week or 2 before FCS national title game. What's the difference? You're telling me, like the Frisco Bowl, I think there were flies when I saw it this year. Like, you want to go to the FBS to play in the Frisco Bowl? What? For what? And I get it. Oh, but more TV eyes are watching that. So you think that's really going to build the brand of NDSU football? And I get it. Right now, the system is different. But I'll finish that point I was making. The 3 bowl games. The last CSU team, I think, was ranked in the top 15. You know how frustrating it is to have a team that you think could compete nationally? We didn't have an illusion that we were going to win a national title. It would have been nice to compete in a playoff and see how far we could go, who we could compete with. Go to the same freaking bowl game that means nothing and never get a shot. That team was so disappointed. And to be fair, they blew their opportunity, if there was one, to go to the Cotton Bowl, which would have been the best thing that they ever had because they messed it up at the end of the season by losing their last game to a crappy team. But they were so disappointed. They did not want to go back to Memphis. I know Memphis and the Liberty Bowl sounds great, but it was cold, wet, and dreary, and they played like they didn't want to be there because they didn't want to be there. They were there for the 3rd time in 4 years, and there wasn't a national championship at stake. It's an exhibition game, and nowadays, if you haven't noticed, we'll opt out of the bowl games. Because if you're a pro prospect, why would you risk your career potentially getting hurt over a game that doesn't matter? Did you see Tucker Kraft? He played in that game after a significant injury at Iowa, the South Dakota kid. Technically, he could have been risking his career, his earnings in the NFL, if some NDSU guy blew out his knee. And you're telling me the FCS doesn't matter. It's a fake championship. This level's so bad. mattered to him, mattered to his state. That's a game with stakes. If that had been a bowl game, maybe Tucker plays. I mean, there's pride in it. He still has that pride. But if SDSU's been in FCS for 5-10 years, and he's risking his career for the Cheetos Bowl, the Toilet Bowl, why? Like, they don't get it. They don't get it up there because they've puffed it into this thing that they think is going to elevate them. It's not about being big time. I get that. I'm not saying that they think it's going to elevate their program. They're going to be right back here where they are now. They're going to be just as bored with that within 10 years, 15 years, 20 years as they are with this.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you want to move up because you're bored, then
water, by the way, Augie.
Yeah. And you're going to get bored at the next point, at the next stop. It's just the way it's going to go. You're going to get bored. You're going to get bored with the bowl games. You're going to get bored with whoever your conference opponents are, and then you're going to want to move to the next one, the next one, the next one. And guess what? Eventually, you can't. You're not getting higher than a G5 conference.
And I'll answer this, Mitch. Let's say the meaningful regular season. The meaningful regular season. Ooh. Okay. Here's the thing. As a CSU alum, I guess the rant's still going. I don't know how long the clock goes. I feel like it's reset a few times.
It hasn't.
When the whole thing went down, I was up for a while because with the CSU leaving. I was up and I'm like, I hated it initially. I still kind of hate it. But then I'm like, we have no choice because this conference is gone. This isn't the Mountain West that I went to school with. This isn't even the FBS I went to school. For all the hates I have with it, it's gotten worse, believe it or not. As much as I hated that bowl system, the Liberty Bowl has actually gotten, I think it's gotten close to actually getting in the playoff now. Like, our conference champion goes to the Los Angeles Bowl, which just got created 2 years ago. I don't think we even play. We're supposed to play a Pac-12 team, which there's only 2 of them now. Whatever. Either way, the thing about that is the Mountain West I knew is gone. It's dead. When I was in school, we had our the games you looked forward to were our rivals. We had Air Force in Wyoming. So if you're SDSU, you're looking forward to NDSU, USD. Maybe some of you like UND too. I don't know. There were some other big brands that we really loved. When I was in school, BYU, Utah. And then when I left, Boise and TCU kind of replaced that. Of course, some of them left too. But those were the brands. Those were the games you look forward to. So let's think about what if SDSU and NDSU moved into a new Mountain West with these meaningful regular season games. There's no CSU, no Boise, no San Diego State. Now, outside those teams that I just mentioned that I would go to, that we really got up for, we didn't give a crap about anybody else. They were all just random. Like, I didn't care about New Mexico. New Mexico still sucks. They just lost to Montana State. I didn't care about UNLV. UNLV is getting better now. They've always been a trash heap of a football program, basically. Haven't really known why. The rest of them were nondescript. Like, you guys, they kind of poo-poo about, we don't care about Illinois State. We don't care about it. And I know the road trips aren't great. Well, guess what? There are a lot of people who can't afford to take a road trip. And the road trips are kind of hard. They're going to get harder to take. If you have the money to fly all over the West, good for you, but 99%, I don't know if there's that many fans who can fly all over the country in this crazy SDSU hosting Wyoming, wonderful. But that's not a rival. Like, SDSU, some of these things would be great, but is it really going to – New Mexico? Do you really get up for East Carolina? I mean, the novelty of it wears off after time. There was novelty when you hosted Western Illinois and Illinois State and all the FCS schools for the first time.
Right.
But now it's worn off. All these things wear off. If you're going to make the move, you've got to do it because it makes sense financially and it puts you in a better place.
Well, that's just it. Because
these reasons that we're bored with this. You're going to get bored with it at the next level eventually. And the other thing that nobody considers, they never consider this when they do the football. What about the rest of your athletic department? I know it's all football all the time, and this is a football show. This is a football show. I get that. But how are you going to pay? I mean, how are you going to pay for all this? Is number one. But how are you? We talk about Conference USA because there's still, I don't know that Mountain West is going to do this. There's still, but I've heard them saying, even if Conference USA, which is just an island of misfit toys all over the country, that's what we should do. Even just get out of FCS, period. Any conference, anywhere, do it. Do it. Has it really been 30 minutes? I don't know.
I did notice that the counter restarts. I think it restarts at 5 minutes, but
yeah. Here's the so the football thing. I realize the world goes by football, and that's what makes the most money. But this isn't the Big 12, the Pac-10. This isn't the SEC. This isn't the Big 10. You're not raking in a multi-million-dollar deal. We don't know what these TV deals are going to look like in these redrawn conferences, but I don't think they're going to make as much in a Mountain West without San Diego State, without the Denver market, without the big markets. So if we're not making that much with those major markets, how are we going to, if we're not getting that much of a TV deal, how are we going to afford to fly our basketball teams all over the country? Not to mention our non-revenue sports like volleyball, like softball, baseball, track, soccer, all these non-revenue sports. How are you going to fly them all over the country? We're gonna kill the rest of our athletic department just to be just to have FBS? Really?
To agree with you for a short bit and then pose the other side. Like you said, you can't do it out of boredom. I remember when we joined the MVFC and it was, oh my God, we get to have UNI at home. We get to have Youngstown State at home. We get to have Illinois State, Southern Illinois. Like that was a big deal. Now it's all Murray and Indiana State. I don't want to watch it. It's boring. Like, okay. You know what? That's going to happen if you go to for sure Conference USA. But let's say the real, because I think majority of South Dakota State fans would be vehemently against joining Conference USA. I don't think that's a question. So let's say it's the Mountain West sans the teams that left. You're going to get bored with New Mexico and UNLV. You'll get bored with those. Now, assuming you get, we're going to assume what I would consider to be SDSU's perfect scenario. The SDSU, NDSU, and Montana State all go. And this would make Kevin lose his mind. I understand why and all that stuff for sure. But we're playing in this hypothetical world, right? You'll get sick of Hawaii and all that stuff. It'll be boring after, say, the first 5 to 10 years. Then you're back in the same boat. Oh, this is boring. Now we got to move it. And we only got bowl games. This sucks. I know a friend of mine who's a JMU fan, his wife just went on a rant about how she misses the playoffs. So there is that. But if you're moving up, there's two things, like you said. Number one, it can't be for boredom. Number two, I have a lot of faith in Justin Sell and President Dunn. They're not just going to do it because they feel it's boredom. They're not going to be doing it just because TV money. I have all the faith in the world that they're smart enough to know that if you move into what the Mountain West is now, they know what the conference media deal is, when it's going to expire, and what it might look like in the future. However, when you bring up other sports for SDSU, and you're looking at the Summit League, outside of the Summit League tournament being where it's located, and you look at it from a growth perspective of your athletic department, is there really much more Summit League wise growth available? Your women's basketball team has been to the Sweet 16. Is realistically Summit League going to help you grow beyond that? Probably not. USD is dipped down a little bit. NDSU is starting to look better, but beyond that, the Summit League's a dumpster fire. Men's basketball, they've won or tied for the conference title 9 or 10 years. Still no NCAA tournament games to prove for it. We've seen with Oral Roberts, it's not about how good you consistently are. It's about having one good year if you're a Summit League team. Is that what you want the peak of your program to be? Or do you look at the Mountain West with, albeit Wyoming and whatever, but you've got still, for the time being, you've got Air Force, you've got UNLV, you've got Nevada, you've got Utah State. You've got real programs that will provide challenges, and your athletic department to this point has shown that when faced with a challenge like that, it doesn't wilt from it, it rises to that occasion, and the fan base will rise to that occasion. So you're looking at that from a basketball perspective as a growth opportunity in that theory. And the other theory I would have is if you're making that move to the Mountain West from an SDSU perspective, you're looking at it not as, oh, we get to host Wyoming, goody. Granted, I think there's a great rivalry opportunity there. That being said, I think you're looking at it more like, because I've said this before on Twitter when NDSU fans are freaking out about FBS and stuff, like, okay, maybe you don't have faith in Matt Larson, but if you've seen what Justin Sell's done, you should probably have faith in that guy. And if you think that they're so inept, they haven't called around and don't have a feel for if there's going to be a G5 playoff, or they're going to create a separate subdivision, maybe not a split, but a separate subdivision within Division One for the Power Four to have their own division with their rules and profit sharing and all that stuff. And then G5 would be the new FCS. If you don't think they know that's coming, if you think that's coming, then you jump, because what's a better chance? You're a geographical outlier right now. There is a chance, albeit small, that if that split happens, you're still stuck in this current level, not able to get up because people don't want to travel there. And then you've got UNI with budget problems. You've got Illinois schools with budget problems. So if you have this, and this is, whether you like it or not, as a Dakota State school, this is your chance to jump to an FBS, solid FBS conference, even missing Colorado State and Boise, and that it's still infinitely better than Conference USA. You're not going to the Sun Belt, and you get an opportunity in this scenario to join a Western-based conference that is doing something of a Sun Belt tactic of getting geographical schools that have strong programs and strong fan bases and growing from there, instead of going Conference USA and going, well, Kennesaw State's near Atlanta, so we're going to get that market. So that's kind of part of the pressure point on this, is this opportunity probably doesn't come again. That's been the discussion forever, is that South Dakota State and North Dakota State are not geographically aligned to anybody where you can just move up. And if you want to do it, I have faith that Justin Sell and Barry Dunn wouldn't just do it to just, oh, we're sick of FCS. We know they're not. They've been on record saying they're not, but they're prepared for the right opportunity. If you think there's a G5 playoff coming where you will not be competing for bowl games and stuff, then I think it's a no-brainer.
That's the big thing. I think that's where you have to. And again, we've said there's a split coming, but ironically, now the state of South Dakota with Marty Jackley is suing the NCAA over this the settlement thing. So we don't know. We think a split's coming, but you made a good point on that too with the basketball. I will say this: the Mountain West thing, that membership, more of that league is getting sliced. It's not just going to end up being those four. I think UNLV is going to be gone somewhere, even though I've said what I said about their football program. It's on the rise. Basketball's got history. And again, somebody, Ron's mentioning location. that market size is going to get poached. San Jose could go to not a great school, but market size, TV size. And then New Mexico, same thing. Again, this was something that I would get into discussions with in NDSU in the first go around with all this, was along with geography, it's more about TV and location than it is whether your program is successful. So
right. Well, and
that was what they really missed the first time around. And it's like, it's not about, they don't care if you really, that's why Missouri State's in this thing right now. They don't care about Missouri State as whether they've done anything in football for success. They just make more success. They're in a bigger market and they're in the footprint down there. But I think you made a good point. Yeah. I mean, what was that?
Linden this is not the same. This is G6 teams can move higher up than that is not the same. If you are in a media market of 2 million people and you have just gobs and gobs of money, like, I don't know, pick a G6 team that moves to the Big 12, one of the P4 schools. That is not the same as moving from the Mountain West to the Pac-2 or whatever any of these other schools in the Mountain West, if they decide to move. If they move, they're not moving up to the SEC. They're not moving up to the Big Ten. They're moving to maybe the AAC. And if they're that's how
Missouri State and I think Springfield, Missouri is like market TV size 80, market size 80. So Springfield's in a pretty good size market. So in theory, you're expanding your market size of your Conference USA, and you can throw that out there for the TV deal. That's what a lot of that comes into. It's how many eyeballs can you get on your league? Make no mistake. Look what again, my alma mater's got pants tonight on national TV. We're not very good in football right now, but we're on in the Denver market. That's why the Pac-12 wants back in with Colorado State, because they get more TVs in the Denver market. That's really the only reason. Otherwise, they'd go to Air Force, but Air Force is in a different television market, technically. So, otherwise, if it was success alone, they might go to North Dakota State or South Dakota State. But those markets don't have nearly the view. Right, there's just not a population base right now.
Right, and if you look though, like what the Mountain West was kind of built off of, it wasn't built off of TV markets at the time. And I'm curious, or was it?
There's the irony of it. The irony of it. The Mountain West. It was one of the original alignments, but it's the gut. The original Mountain West was the guts of the Western Athletic Conference.
That's right. Then I'm an idiot. I apologize.
No, you're fine. But the irony of that was that it broke away because the WAC had gotten too big and too bloated. Because everybody was afraid that all of these, there was going to be they had split into divisions. It was like 20 teams and had teams from all over the stretch, from like Texas to California, and they're like, we're not going to be able to play our rivals anymore. This conference doesn't make sense. We want to split away. We were afraid we weren't going to play. BYU and Utah were afraid they weren't going to play each other. CSU and Wyoming were afraid. Imagine preserving your rivalries and having a conference that makes geographical sense now. So that was an answer. That's why the Mountain West split away, and now the Mountain West has been slowly killed, or is in its original form is being killed, to basically rebirth these super conferences. It's just kind of wild that we hit this point. But I think, to your point, I really do like that point you made, that the Mountain West in the original format would have been perfect for SDSU and NDSU, because it would have been a great basketball conference. It would have brought the television money, would have been perfect.
Well,
now,
in theory, the theory I would go off of is if we've seen at the G5 level how unsuccessful going by markets is, because look at Conference USA's media deal. They've got all the markets in the world and it ain't worth shit. So if I'm the Mountain West, I would consider, hey, the people who actually watch matter. I didn't know Boise State because I knew where Boise, Idaho was when I was a kid. I knew Boise State because they were good and they won the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma. Like, I feel that there's potential for money to be made from a conference that way to get eyeballs because they're good and they have strong fan bases. And I'm curious if the Mountain, I personally feel, not just from an SDSU standpoint, like take SDSU out of it, I think that's a more interesting conference that's worth more money in the long run to me. I think there's potential at a G5 level to make more money where you have games that matter of good teams, where you get teams that are consistently have a couple teams that are top 25 teams that are constantly on the mouse of college game day and everything else. That's got to be worth something. And I just want to say to Linden, quick, Sioux Falls and Fargo are growing like crazy. Who says they won't be that size in the future? Well, then why do you have to move to? Then why are you beating your dick to go into FBS right now? Then just wait until then, and people will snap you up for the market.
Yeah, that's going to be.
That's my thing.
Good point. It's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't. I guess the one thing I would say is that's why I say I really, and the one thing you're saying about Justin, I heard an interview. I know I retweeted this. The Montana athletic director sounded very similar to what I've heard Justin saying. Very similar wording. I wonder if there's communication. I mean, maybe in the end, that might be the best way for the schools in this region of the country to move up. We've talked about that Snow Belt conference before, or trying to.
Well, the problem is forcing your way up as like a whole, as a conference as a whole.
I think right now, but we don't know what the landscape's going to look like in a few years. I mean, just the shifting of this thing. It's a fluid thing. We just don't know. It changes so much every year. I think maybe, and that's why I say that's the other big part of that. I disagree with the people who are like, we've just got to leap now and, to hell and high water with whatever comes. It just shifts so much every minute that you could, it's like trying to jump out of the Titanic. It's like, if you think you're getting out of a sinking ship, you may be getting into another sinking ship. You've got to have a little bit of planning here.
Here's something else that I do know that you have to, that has to happen if you're South Dakota State or North Dakota State, I would imagine. But I know from South Dakota State, you've got to go to the border regions and get the blessing, which means you would be getting the blessing to leave USD behind, which could be tricky.
That's a big issue in Montana too. I know they're bonded there too. Yeah.
Right, but in this instance, those two would be moving together, and then the North and South NDSU and SDSU would be moving separately. So that would be a stickier wicket there.
That's similar up in North Dakota. They'd have UND would raise hell, I think, too. There'd be hell raised with that.
Big time. But in the end, I think both of them could get it done if they wanted to, because they've already moved once without them. I think the biggest key there would be, would they be able to move up without all the barbaric stipulations that were thrown on them when they moved up the first time? When SDSU moved up, and you're not allowed to do student fees, everything's got to be publicly raised, this, and then USD moved up and they were allowed to do all those things. I'm curious if that would be the case going forwards. I do know, I have talked to several people who are they're not Jacks fans. They go up to a game every now and again to watch football, who have said to me, man, it would be cool if they were FBS to have a South Dakota school at that level. So I think you would, at least initially, and that this would be dependent on success, but you would initially get a surge in fandom.
I think so.
From that side of things.
There'd be the sugar rush.
And there's always the never-ending rumor out of Fargo is, well, if they decide to go to FBS, they got to they've got an $85 million stadium already paid for, just waiting to be built if they decide to. I have it on good, good authority. That's been pushed around up there for a decade. That if we go FBS, we've got this, and this. It's already paid for.
I've seen a lot of stuff up there that they've had tough times pushing anything through publicly up there. So
right,
unless there's a T. Boone Pickens ready to. But we should probably wrap up here very quick because this went off the rail. Yeah, I mean, I guess the bullet point I'll wrap that up with, because I was gonna just say, main bullet point I was gonna say is every time the FBS conversation comes up, NDSU inevitably has a clunker, and I think it filters to their program, and it becomes a distraction in some way.
Yep.
Maybe it became one. Although credit East Tennessee State, they played a great game. I think we see that it's probably still not immune to their program even under Tim Polasek. Because when you're a 27.5-point favorite, I'm sure you can't, when you live in that town and all that talk is constantly there from the media, from your fans, from your students, I'm sure, even probably from your teachers are probably talking about it. It has to be a distraction. The way we saw with SDSU tonight playing a D2 team. They probably think, some of them have to be thinking, we got this one in the bag. Every time, especially over the last 5 years, this becomes an issue in season. It seems like they become out distracted. And East Tennessee State was either probably a little combination of both, somewhere in the middle, better team than they were given credit for. And I think there are definitely some defensive issues with NDSU, missing Wisniewski, who now looks like he will not play at all. They just had a linebacker who got booted off the team for a gun issue. And you did a little bit, Ron, but we were maybe bleeding there anyway. So we'll see. I mean, non-conference is never. You always have to take it with a little pinch of salt and a little grain of salt, whatever you want to say. But I think it's not going to go away. But I think if there's one thing I think SDSU's done really well, it hasn't been as pervasive. In part because the media up here doesn't drive it. It's just not the same up here. We don't have it. And until an invite actually comes, it's not going to be, maybe this will be the time where it gets tested. That remains to be seen. But Jimmy it's not been the distraction yet. I think that's, the main thing is the main thing, the cliche, want to know. I think that would be the concern. As long as SDSU, as long as it doesn't filter out to the players, I don't think you'll see that become an issue with them. But inevitably, when the FBS talk happens up there, it filters into their program, and I think that might have happened a little bit today. But it certainly spices up the Valley, and the Valley had a bit of a rough week. We'll see if it can turn things around next week, as we largely will wrap up non-conference with the Jacks heading to Southeast Louisiana. The Coyotes will, hopefully, they don't run into a massive case of Drake having dysentery or Black Death or, I don't know.
Polio.
Is there some disease where they fight Kendrick Lamar? Maybe Drake will get into a bunch of fights with Lamar University, have a beef with them. They're going to have a beef with Lamar University. That seems to be the thing now, Drake and Lamar, right? Kendrick Lamar? I don't know. I'm trying to make a pop culture thing, but I'm not really that culture.
Michael, God bless you for showing up after Murray finally wins. I hope you keep showing up, because I threatened to turn your mascot into a glue stick after you guys screwed me on picks 2 weeks in a row. So I hope you guys keep winning. I hope you keep showing up, man, because, man, I was mad at you guys.
Well, that's a sign, because I actually finally drove myself coughing and laughing all at once. So good way to end with a whooping cough laugh.
Yes.
Congratulations, Portland State. Get better.
Yep.
Go lose all 11 of your games. 11, because I guess you can't go 0-12 now.
Right.
That'll do it for Jack. That'll do it for the post-game show. A very lively one for a week that we thought was going to be, pretty boring. It turned very lively, very unexpectedly. But we will see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks for joining us, degenerates.